Thanks for tuning in to Murder Murder News, your true crime source for missing persons, breaking cases, survivor stories, and cold cases, plus recommendations for the newest TV shows and podcasts. We like to think of ourselves as a true crime family, a cult if you will, and our cult wants to help fight for social justice, solve some cold cases, play with some baby goats, and maybe drink some fruit wine. I'm Aurora.
And I'm your online murder friend, Angelina. Cults are no fun alone, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell all of your true crime friends to join the commune at patreon.com/murdermurdernews. This is the Week in True Crime. We have a special guest with us today to discuss a very important case that has not been given the attention it deserves in the media. 21-year-old Marquis Jaylen Brown was a talented athlete and played linebacker and fullback at Duquesne University. He had just celebrated his 21st birthday and was looking forward to the university homecoming game coming up that weekend. Then, on October 4th, 2018, he died of extremely suspicious circumstances at his university. It's important to note that the information released from police and the media has not been consistent. Some reports have said that around 10:30 p.m., he and his roommate had a fight at Brodier Hall, and the police and campus security were called in. Some reports have said that he was acting agitated and his roommate was trying to calm him down, and police were called in as a result. The police who arrived at the scene were not wearing body cams, so unfortunately we don't know what happened next. According to the police, when they arrived in his room, he was agitated and he picked up a chair, knocked the glass out of the window, and then suddenly just jumped to his death 16 stories down.
Jaylen's mother, Dannielle Brown, does not believe this version of the story and has been fighting for answers to what really happened. According to Dannielle, he was a happy student with so much to look forward to. They had just gotten back from a trip to Hawaii together. He visited his best friend to play PlayStation earlier in the evening, and she had just cash-apped him money for a haircut. He did not have a history of mental health issues or depression. Aside from him seemingly being in a good mental place, Dannielle just doesn't believe the evidence supports the idea of him jumping out of a window. His injuries from his autopsy did not seem to be consistent with the type of injuries you would expect if that were the case, which we'll get to a little bit later. And for Dannielle, even if the version of the story authorities released was true, there's still the issue of the police officers being called to the scene for what sounds like a wellness check, seemingly having escalated the situation instead of de-escalating it. It seems pretty implausible that anyone would go from playing PlayStation with a friend to being a little agitated to jumping out of a 16-story window without some sort of confrontation having taken place. We have Jaylen's mother, Dannielle, with us today to discuss the death of her son. Dannielle just ended a 237-day hunger strike in an attempt to keep Jaylen's name in the news and to get the university to open an investigation into what really happened that night. We're so happy to have you here. I had just heard recently, I think over the weekend, about Jaylen's story from a TikTok, and it's just so heartbreaking. It just seems, like we talked about, like so absurd that the police are giving you the runaround and that they're telling this story that just seems like impossible. Like their version of the story just doesn't feel possible to me. And I just really feel for you having to go through this. And it must just feel so maddening knowing that there's this alternative thing that really happened and that these people are kind of like gaslighting you, honestly.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I am unavailable, broken, stuck in a place that to me, when I started the hunger strike, it was because I couldn't breathe. Like George Floyd, the knee was on my neck. Mm-hmm. So what did they really have? It wasn't until I got to Freedom Corner and sat out there for 2 days, under the elements with a rocking chair, that first I realized that the police I was up the street from a police precinct. They kept driving up and down. Neither one of them stopped to say, why is this strange woman sitting in the middle of Freedom Corner in a rocking chair? No wellness check, nothing. That's when I knew what I was up against. Mm-hmm. But I sat there for 2 days and I literally said, God, I will die to myself. This is you and I on this journey. And it was at that point that I started to take in air. because I
Right.
was actively doing something as a mother. Couldn't bring, I looked over my left shoulder and I could see the building where my son took his last breath.
Right.
And I looked over my right shoulder and I saw St. Benedict the Moor with the statue overlooking Pittsburgh, the oldest African American church in Pittsburgh. And I took in air. As crazy as it sounds, to embark on a hunger strike, to be able to say I can breathe, because
Right.
I was doing something.
I get it. And I think it's incredibly relatable. Like what you feel like you're having to do, how there just is no peace for you. There's no rest for you until you start getting some answers. I think it was it probably felt like a very therapeutic way for you to process everything, and like you were doing something. And I've seen many news articles about it. So you've gotten media attention, which is exactly what you want. Like the more eyes you have on this, the more people making noise, the better off you are. So I thought that was quite brilliant and dedicated and admirable. And I just think you're so impressive and amazing. And I'm so sorry you're going through all of this, but we really are honored to talk to you today. And I'm sorry for everything you're going through.
Thank you. Thank you. This level of advocacy that I'm doing, Oprah as Meghan and Harry, but as Meghan, she had a pause. She said, wait a minute, are you saying you are silent or silenced?
Right.
And for a lot of us women, we are met with the same question, are we silent or are we silenced? And, I found myself being silent, stuck in my grief, because I could not bring them back, but I knew an injustice had been done, but I didn't have the tools or the mental wherewithal to address it at that time. But when I did, quickly, I realized I was silenced. So I could relate to Meghan, whereas you felt the knock of death at your door. And you were, she said, I almost took my life. It was suicidal because she had all these things around her, even a child on a breast. But yet she still felt that her voice didn't matter.
Right.
So I look at these shows and I look at national attention, and we tend to celebrate the top, the sensational, the ones, the celebrities tend to celebrate those who have made, the top news, like Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Atiana Jefferson, Botham J. All of these mothers I'm connected to, by the way.
Right.
But, we see their posters on these universities. We see all of these things. But the reality of it is, and in the social media, is what about the 826 mothers who lost their children in 2020 due to questionable circumstances at the hands of law enforcement?
Right. Gosh,
Maybe out of that 826, 400 of them had mothers.
Yeah.
What about their tear-stained pillowcases? So that's why you often hear me say, for the mothers, when the camera's not rolling, because we exist and our voices matter.
Can you tell us what you know about Jaylen's mental health state leading up to the night of October 4th at 10 p.m.? I know you had recently gotten back from a trip to Hawaii. There was a big homecoming event coming up on October 6th, and Jaylen was a very talented athlete. When was the last time you talked to him, and what was he doing that evening prior to his death?
Well, I had cash apped him for money to get his hair cut. He was super excited. His brother and friends were coming into town. He turned 21 at this point, turned 21 years old, and he was just on cloud nine. Jaylen has always had a jovial spirit. He never, ever had issues with mental health, complained about suicide. He was a very calm, even kid, never had any mental health issues at all.
Wow.
Had just started his own business at school. He knew that I was a struggling mom because, you know, I was a single parent and I had one kid at University of Kentucky, him that had been in private school all, you know, pretty majority of their grade school lives. So they were introduced to another level of living, if you will. Like they went to the Potomac school. That's the same school the vice president kids went to, the Bush kids. And so they Capital One, these are business owners at the Potomac school. The President Obama was Jaylen was on the waiting list at Sidwell Friends, where President Obama kids went. Very high IQ, but a very well leveled kid, very happy kid. Saw the world, you know, sent him on his school trips to Spain. And so he was a kid that, you know, came from a family, his grandmother, you know, we live here in Washington, D.C., not in a bad neighborhood. So, you know, I worked hard to make sure he had the things that he needed. And again, he was just, you know, he had friendships across the board from all walks of life, you know, white, black, you name it. He had, you know, those were his inner circle. So, Mom, can you cash at me? I got to get my hair. Just left football practice, got his haircut, fresh haircut. And he, you know, he was on his way to his friend's house to play PlayStation. That's what his state of mental health. Coming back from Hawaii, had a fabulous time. You know, no one person, not even his counselor on the football team that they got rid of, he reached out to me anonymously and said, Jaylen, of all the kids on that field who had troubling backgrounds, he said, your son was solid. And he never tested positive for any drugs. He cared about playing time.
Right.
That was his number. He barely made it to Hawaii as a second string because they was only taking the first string. He cared about playing time. He wouldn't put himself knowingly in harm's way.
That's great.
And take a substance. And then when they found him, he was in and out of his room. He was not thinking about going out a window. So when you even have that mental health, that's a disconnect right there.
Yeah, it sounds like he was in a pretty good place. You know, all things considered, it seems like he had a lot to be hopeful for. And it's great that he had such a great support system in you and friends. I have read that, like you mentioned, that he was playing PlayStation with a friend earlier in the evening. Have you ever spoken with that friend about how he was acting that night? Like, did he seem to also be in a good place with his friend? Has he ever weighed in about that?
Yes, actually, my investigator actually spoke to him. But you know, the same story, because the first thing this mother want to know when she gets on the scene is what happened. And the first person she's going to go to is the best friend. And so I said to him, what happened? And he said to me that, you know, he don't know. He said Jaylen took 2 puffs of what he was smoking. He said he only took 2 puffs, and he was playing PlayStation. And then he complained that his stomach hurt. And then he abruptly got up and left to head back to his room. And I saw a video that they showed my family and I, you know, when we first got there, and he was very hyper in the elevator. You can see him in the elevator moving around, jumping, you know, dancing, everything, nothing violent, not beating his head up against the wall or punching on the wall or having a fit. He was just dancing, really jovial dancing, you know, and just jittery. But he had a Gatorade in his hand, and he threw that Gatorade down. And my question is, why didn't you all pick up that Gatorade and test that? You had footage. So, and all you see him is skipping up and down the hallway. And you don't see him acting violent, but you see him under the influence.
Right. Now, what happened next is unfortunately pretty unclear, whatever the case is, because the police were called and Duquesne University police and campus security officers arrived, all without body cams. So can you tell us what you were told by the police about what happened that night?
Sure. I was told that my son, in the room, they asked for his ID. He had sat down and appeared to be calm. And then all of a sudden, he just jumps up and sprints. Now, we're talking about a small size dorm room. So I don't know how you can sprint anywhere. But anyway, jumps up and sprints to the chair, and picks up a chair, hit the window, put the chair back down, and climbs on the chair and goes out the window. This is the very first report told to me. And I'm saying to myself, first of all, 4 people in the room. And I'm saying, now, when you first come in the dorm room, there's a kitchen right there. Now, the first thing, and when you found him, he was in and out the room, up and down the hallway. The first count was he jumped. The second count was they public knowledge that I'm speaking on. He died, and they attempted to grab his ankle. So that means you were proximity to him.
Right.
Were you close or were you not close? And how did you not keep him safe? Meaning that if this is Black, this is in the crust of Black Lives Matter. So if he went to the kitchen, he could have picked up a knife and hurt himself or hurt you.
Yeah.
But you give him that much leeway to do that. So a chair is a weapon at this point, because clearly, something is wrong. He's having a mental health crisis.
Right.
Regardless of what was introduced in his system, you're dealing with a mental health crisis at this point.
Right.
And according to the press release at day 40, they said the officers already said this, were in shock. But these are trained officers. How do you go in shock? So either you watched him or your hands was on him. Because it takes a lot to get up from a calm state. And so, then he goes pick up a chair. That's a movement. Getting up is a movement. Traveling to the chair is a movement. Picking up the chair is a movement. All these intervals. Having enough power to generate a small fake wood chair, student chair, to break a window. Enough power to do that. But yet half of the window was still intact.
Yeah.
So you're going to break it low? You put the chair back down. So you can't climb on it, because then the other half of the window would have been gone. So of course you had to change it to dive. But if you ask my expert opinion and looking at the window that never made it out to the public, that the city police have, any expert that would have looked at that window would have said, wait a minute. My son had a gash on his head. The gash on his head was circular in motion. His face was perfect.
Right.
Perfect. Just a little gash on it, not a little, about this size gash on his head, which tells me he had a blunt force hit to the head.
Right.
You see that deep purple and it's isolated like that, which tells me my theory is you hit him. He bent over because his irrationality and the pressure, because those windows were faulty, he went out that window. And he went out that window backwards, which is why the trauma in the branches scratched this way on his side and was on the back, and his face was perfect. Because had he died, this should have been, anybody who rides a bike through trees, you will get scratched and whoops across your face clearly at a speed. I don't know if you ever rode on a bike and you hit branches, but they will whip you. He had not that. He should have been hitting those trees face-wise had he dived. Right. And his weight of his body being solid wouldn't have caused him to somersault in air.
Right.
So, which means that he fell backwards and he hit those trees, and the impact was all right here to his back. So again, it makes it hard for me to believe. And then you had enough time to grab his ankle. First of all, if he dived out, you wouldn't have been close enough to grab his ankle. That's the smoking gun right there.
Right.
But nobody, I have nobody who has stepped up to, I can only do so much.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for clarifying that. The story doesn't really make any logical sense to me. I think when we sort of look at this, like, is it possible that he was having some sort of mental distress that, certainly not everybody tells their mom everything. So is there a chance that you didn't know he was going through a tough time? Maybe in theory. Is there a chance that he had a bad reaction to the amount of marijuana that was in the system? I kind of don't think this would happen.
Very unlikely.
There might have been something else going on in the Gatorade, like you said, but it doesn't seem like that came up in the autopsy. But I just, knowing also that this happened in the kitchen, and if somebody was feeling suicidal, they had access to knives, like they could have threatened. If they were feeling like attacking somebody, they could have gone after the police or whatever with that.
Well, no, it didn't happen in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I would just say the kitchen is right there.
Right. But it's close. And I feel like that might be the direction you might go if you were planning on injuring yourself or somebody else.
Yeah, it's strange to jump out the window first thing.
And to just, go from being like in a dancey kind of fun mood and then to throwing a chair out the window and diving out it. I've also seen the way the glass was broken, which we'll have photographs of that in our the YouTube video if you're watching it. And if you're listening to the podcast version, we'll have pictures of the broken window on our Instagram as well for anybody listening to this. It doesn't look like he would have had to be, I know he was athletic, but like to be able to jump over that in that way where he broke it, and you're right, he would have had broken glass on his face. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't really make any sense. So you talked a little bit about the autopsy, and I think that that's really interesting about not having cuts from glass on his face. Was there anything else detected other than the marijuana when they did a drug test?
No, in the marijuana was very minimal, which would have been consistent with 2 puffs.
Right.
Okay. It was not even on radar for real, which is unfortunate for me because, had the school followed the NCAA guidelines, when there's known drugs to be suspected, everybody immediately gets tested. However, the roommate wasn't immediately drug tested, which any foreign drug like K2 or, any chemical would have still been in the live body and picked up had they tested that. Once you're gone and they introduce everything to try to life save you, it's a chemical. So your body metabolizes it. Anybody would tell you there's no drug test for chemicals that is in your body, like those street drugs. They can drug test for anything that's derivative of the cocoa plant, which is crack, and cocaine, anything of the marijuana plant, which is a whole lot of varieties. That's why we call it THC. Mm-hmm. Those things can be tested, the origin of it, but when you're talking about, something equivalent to bleach, there's no test that can pick up bleach in your body per se.
So there could be some other element involved.
Absolutely. So, it's again, so the autopsy, so So then the school stated they requested a drug test. However, the families were allowed to hire attorney to block that.
Wow.
But yet the homecoming game took place and the championship ring was won this year. I mean, that year. I'm sorry.
Wow. And to think that the families would have put up any sort of fight about that, like you would think that they would be devastated about a roommate dying in such a tragic way if the story they're telling was accurate and he jumped out the window. I would do anything in my power to help.
Yeah.
You know, like
you think
I
they'd
would
be
want,
eager to
Yes.
give that information.
I was told from the mother that it was her duty to protect her son. And I understood that. I understood. As crazy as it is, I understood it.
So you have been fighting endlessly to get justice for Jaylen and to get answers about what really happened on October 4th. You just finished a 240-day hunger strike that ended on your 50th birthday to bring attention to this case. You also just announced the launch of the Marquis Jaylen Brown Foundation. Can you tell us more about what inspired your hunger strike and what you hope to do with the new foundation?
Okay, I stopped counting at 237. Okay. And the reason is because of the day I went in the hospital. Now technically, really, you can't say 240 because that's when I started taking in solid food. And how symbolic, Jaylen's number is 40. So, but I for just to be, literally, 237 from when I literally started, life-saving measures.
I am just as impressed at 237 days.
Yeah, that is still a very long time.
Very, very impressive.
I had vertigo real bad where I would get out the bed and then lay on the floor and the floor gave away. I had migraines that were relentless and it felt like a truck was hitting me constantly that it blinded me. Several times I passed out and one time that I passed out, I had foam come out the side of my mouth, which I knew I possibly had a seizure at that time.
Oh my God.
So I had a decision to make. Do I stay here and let it run its course in my apartment? Because by this time I had to get an apartment because we had to move off the Freedom Corner because we had Tent Village there. And, with COVID and everything, the cold, Pittsburgh winters are harsh. So I had to incur another financial and take whatever extra money in hope and donation from others to even get an apartment in Pittsburgh to be able to continue the actions. And plus I had a doctor, Dr. Wagner, that was with me from day 9 of the hunger strike when I was out on the streets at Freedom Corner. And so he was my primary doctor through this hunger strike. And it was imperative that I be close to him. And so I've outlasted every woman in the United States, but Solange, who did nuclear weapons, did 40 days, but yet she got national attention. As a Black woman, I always say I'm the most disrespected Black mother in America, 0 attention. So, things like this and what happened at the Capitol, if you're a Black person, you question your value here in America. So, I hope I answered the question. But I suffered some brain damage from that.
Yeah?
Yes, memory, cognitive skills. I'm on the mend of it. I have to take strong, vitamins, thiamine, fluoride.
So you're still recovering, obviously.
I'm still recovering. I'm getting better and stronger every day, but you can't do 237 days and think your body is not going to feel the impact of it.
For sure.
Well, I'm sorry that you did not get more media attention, but it did get our attention. And We want you to tell us what our viewers can do to help and help get the word out. Talk to us more about the foundation, how they can participate. Is donating the best thing to do? Is sharing the story enough? What can we do to help?
You know, Marquis Jaylen Brown Foundation was birthed from a hard place. And that's why you often hear me say from trauma to triumph. Because when I realized the three demands were not getting met, although they claimed they would, and that they would even plant $100,000 seed into the foundation, it couldn't bring back my son's life. And, you know, it would never was about the money. It was about those three demands. Body, mental, first one is right for a mother or any parent to conduct an independent investigation, especially if you claim to have done the same. Body cameras. These are grown adults, you know, that the same adults you encounter in the street. And so body cameras, and these officers, campus police carry body weapons. I mean, carry weapons, and you're dealing with our grown adult children. So it should never be their narrative against your child's narrative. And the last but not least, crisis intervention, de-escalation, mental health, because something went wrong in that room that did not keep my son safe. You found him alive. The only exit he knew was out that front door, up and down the hallway. However, you know, mentally going on with him, he had enough vision and common sense and remembrance to use the front door. So what happens when we incorporate law enforcement into the mix, that our children are dying unarmed? So why wasn't the first call when you knew immediately that this child was experiencing a mental health? Why was not one of those people that showed up was a mental health or a crisis intervention trained officer or person on the scene? Because had there been, they would have never announced on day 40. Shock would not have been associated with what the officers experienced. That's the least word you want to hear is someone going in shock. You don't hire them to go in shock. So then it makes you question, how do you vet these officers? Are these officers people that you know, are they, you know, campus police can be a pool that attracts officers that might not have cut it on the state, local government, you know, federal level, had disciplinary actions against them. And some of them are allowed to go leave a precinct, go across state lines and get another job. Well, guess what? A lot of them come to campuses as well. And that's like a hub for them to go to. And they're older and they're retired. So how fit are these officers? So, you know, it raises a lot of questions that if you have a college student, most college students go to school and there are, you know, nothing happens. But what about the one too many? Because there is one too many. And it's on all of us to be passionate about that, because we shouldn't wait till it happened to our child. If we can create a safer campus for these students, then why not be proactive instead of reactive? So the Marquis Jaylen Brown Foundation was birthed out of a hard place, but it's for the mothers' voices, because we don't want to be silenced anymore. We're mother bears. These are our children, even though they're grown students. We want them protected. We don't want them sent to college and have them returned to us in a casket. I can't tell you the number of date rape. That's a whole nother conversation.
Oh yeah.
You know, you don't hear that being reported to your outside those walls. It's self-contained. So the foundation is saying we're a third-party resource, another layer of accountability. I have this shirt on. It says USIOs, University Social Injustice Observers. We want this program to take off on every college campus. We want to work with the school. It's not an anti-administration, anti-school program. It's a collective of students and the university working together, hopefully they can resolve it on their end first. But should that student feel unsafe or feel like their justice is not being addressed, then they have another layer of reporting. And then we should be able to have a relationship with these schools and that we could resolve the matter. And if it can't, and it requires even more resources, then the USIO, the Marquis Jaylen Brown Foundation, wants to be connected to and partner with those resources so we can get that student help.
If any of our viewers or listeners want to get involved and help out with the foundation or to donate to the foundation, how can they do that?
Go to mjbfoundations.net. Okay. There's information on how to sign up to be a USIO. We want all students. You can sign up anonymously. We want teachers. We want administrators. Anybody, parents, anybody can be a USIO. Basically, what it is that you're saying is that I'm going to be an observer to social injustices that's happening on campus. And if it goes unresolved, I'm going to send an incident report to the MJB Foundation, and anonymously or not, and trust that they can partner and hopefully get answers for that student. I want people to invite me. You know, they have social justices on campus, but they like to teach about people who are gone. What about those people who are practicing social justice right here and are still alive? Invite me into your classroom. This is where I can partner with the schools. This is where I can come in and talk, to the students about social justice and promote. That's one of Duquesne's core values, promote social justice, their spiritual core value. So I can come into the class, invite me in, to talk to the students about social justice. And hey, look, Masters in Counseling Psychology. We got a program coming out, the MJB Foundation, that will make it college credit for freshman students to be exposed. They can opt out of it, but who will opt out of an easy 2-credit course? Let the freshman classroom understand what mental health is. Let's normalize mental health. We got programs that we're trying to take to the Senate, to Congress, that says to the Surgeon General and say, let's normalize mental health. It should never be a taboo anymore. If you recommend us to get annual breast mammogram, why can't we get annual mental health checkup?
Absolutely.
Let's normalize this. We got a problem in the U.S. The MJB Foundation wants to be an impactful force to help lead and partner with other organizations to get a bill passed so that we can have greater mental health awareness on the federal level.
Wow. That's great. Danny, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much for sharing Jaylen's story with us. Thank you for doing all you're doing with this foundation. Like, this is, it's really something we talk a lot about, even sometimes just Angelina and I privately, about how mental health is failing so many people at so many levels, and we don't have free access to it in the US. But this is such a great example of that, and how police should not be the people de-escalating these situations. So,
or investigating their own crimes.
Right.
Yeah. Not okay.
It's very inspiring what you're doing, and it's going to help bring comfort to a lot of people in situations like Jaylen and others as well, which is really nice.
But wow, you are such a force.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for giving me a platform to.
Of course.
I appreciate that so much. And I pray that partners of you all are able to pick up on this, and grace and mercy abounds, and that I can't bring my son back. But look, if I could just get one child, hey, look, I've done more than enough.
Thanks so much for tuning into This Week in True Crime with Murder News. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button below, give us a thumbs up, and tell all of your true crime friends.
Help support Murder Murder News by visiting our Patreon at patreon.com/murdermurdernews. We have some great benefits like merch, a shout out on our YouTube and podcast, exclusive episodes, and early access to tickets for our live online events. Your support helps us feed the MMN goats, add to our community wig wall, and help support our amazing writers that keep you up to date with the latest breaking news every day on murdermurder.news. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. See you next week.